Were the main option for students, but private colleges are now growing fast. A new rule will soon let these private schools become official universities, giving more students a chance to study and shape the future for learning in the country. For more on this now, we speak to Dr. Deonita Damons, who's the director of Boston City Campus. Thank you so much for your time, Doc. So let's talk about this move and what it actually means for education in the country. I mean, this new policy allowing private colleges to gain official university status. How do you see this changing the higher education landscape in the country over the next few years or so?
Good morning, Colleen, and thank you much for having me. The new institutional types policy represents an exciting and progressive moment for SA higher education landscape, one that speaks to how far we've come from democratizing access to quality learning and recognizing that excellence across all types of institutions and not just in terms of ownership. So I think the policy is progressive because it finally recognizes that the value and quality of higher education don't depend on whether an institution is public or private, but rather on its scope of offerings and its institutional capability. So we're really seeing a moving away from the hierarchy and exclusivity towards a more inclusive model where excellence can be found across the sector. And it does align South African practices with global and continental practices where institutional type simply reflects what the institution does, its range or scope of qualifications, its level of research and research intensity, and its community engagement, not necessarily who owns it. So it does give the status to the institution, but it doesn't diminish the quality of offering that students can enjoy from the various types of institutions that will be established under the new policy.
And here's the thing, you talk about the offerings as well as the quality of those offerings. Now, many students and parents are curious about the quality of education, particularly at private institutions, Doc, compared to the traditional public universities. Just how can private universities ensure they meet academic standards while expanding access?
Just so that everyone is aware of it, that already private higher education institutions are benchmarked and evaluated on the same criteria as public universities. So we go through the same rigorous accreditation process, registration process for our programs and our offerings, and we have to maintain the same level of quality and standards. So even before the promulgation of the policy, private higher education institutions were picked against the same standards as your public institution. So there's no question that the quality of offering is similar or similar to what the public institutions were offering. But I think what happens now with the policy is we are just going to be classified in the same tier. So we're either going to be higher education colleges, university colleges or universities, depending on the scope of our offering. So there's going to be no question that we're still going to maintain the quality, the standards, because we are still accredited by the same council. It is just that our status is going to change based on our scope of offering and based on the range of programs that we're offering, of course. And our governance structures, that's important to mention.
Yes, and Doc, private higher education has since grown rapidly in recent years. We've seen with the various institutions as well. Just what factors do you think have contributed most to this growth? And why are students increasingly choosing private institutions?
We've got 26 public universities in South Africa, and they cannot accommodate the demand for higher education. So private higher education institutions have played a significant and tremendous role in accommodating and meeting the demand for higher education. We have also grown in terms of our level of maturity, our level of governance structures within various institutions. So we definitely play a pivotal role in higher education and access to quality higher education within the South African scope. The only thing the policy now does is it now recognizes the contribution of private higher education institutions and will ultimately recognizes the extent of research outputs that we can deliver on and our community engagement, which is one of the key criteria to be referenced as a university under the new policy.
And some critics worry that the line between public and private universities may just get blurred, leading to competition for resources or students as well. How do you respond to concerns about equity as well as accessibility?
Well, it's good competition, but I think it's healthy competition. That's first and foremost. I think what we must just bear in mind is that with the promulgation of the policy and now also a private higher education institution being classified as a university or getting the designation as university, we do not take away resources from the state as private higher education institutions because we receive no subsidy from the state. And this policy doesn't change anything along those lines. So any infrastructure investment being made by your private universities will be made by private individuals. So we're not taking away resources from the state in terms of equipping these institutions to be designated as universities. But it does allow students to say that I'm now going to university, whether they're going to a private institution or public institution.
Yes, and just what opportunities and challenges do you foresee, particularly for students, Doc, now that, private colleges can apply for university status, especially in terms of tuition, scholarships and career prospects just going forward?
I think the one thing we must now start doing is creating an awareness or an education to the public and the students out there so that they can understand what these different or the three institutional types actually mean for an institution. That it doesn't diminish the quality, it doesn't diminish the accreditation of the institution, it's simply classifying the institution based on their scope and broad offering. And that is similar to the workplace. The workplace also needs to understand, or the employers need to understand, what these different institutional types mean, and it doesn't diminish the quality of the qualification that each of these institutions offer or award at the end of the day. So there is going to be definite work to be done by private institutions, public institutions, and government to educate the public at large in terms of what this policy means to the institution, to the student most of all, and to the parents as well.
And I want us to look ahead now. Just how will the institution that you represent, as well as other private institutions, ensure that this expansion benefits students and supports innovation, as well as strengthens the country's overall education system? Because there's a need, and that is the need that, many people really want these structures to be fine-tuned for and fit for purpose.
As Boston City Campus, we obviously are going to wait for the promulgation of the amendments to the PHEI regulations, because our process of applying for institutional registration is governed by the regulations on PHEI, and those are coming out, and it will be coming out to provide us with practical guide of how we're going to implement the policy. At the moment, as the policy was promulgated, all PHEIs as a base will be classified as higher education colleges, and the amendments to the regulations will determine how we can apply for our conversion and what the time period will be and how long we will stay in a specific typology before we move to the next. So even as our institution, we are awaiting these amendments to the regulations so that we can see what infrastructure expenditure we need to outline so that we can meet a specific criteria depending on our scope of offering and depending on our strategy in terms of where we want to see ourselves within the future.
Right, I must thank you so much for your time and insights on the program, Doc, and that is Dr. Deonita Damons, who is a director at Boston City Campus. Thanks so much for your time and insights.